The morning of October 3, 1998, began like any other in the quiet town of Elmridge. The sun had barely crept above the horizon as children, bundled in light jackets, gathered outside Mill Creek Elementary, buzzing with excitement for their annual fall field trip. 23 third-grade students, laughing and clinging to sack lunches, lined up as their teacher, Miss Haley, checked names off her clipboard. The destination was Fairhaven Forest, a serene patch of woods just 15 miles outside town, known for its trails and colorful autumn canopy. Parents waved as the yellow school bus pulled away, the morning air filled with honks and cheers. Miss Haley sat at the front, guiding the chatter toward quiet anticipation of nature walks and leaf collections. The driver, Mr. Dempsey, a man with decades of spotless service, drove the familiar route, humming softly to an old tune on the radio. By noon, the school secretary noticed something strange. The class hadn't returned. There was no call from Miss Haley, no update from Mr. Dempsey. The park rangers at Fairhaven said no school bus had arrived. Panic set in by 2 p.m. The principal contacted parents, local police were notified, and a search party was formed. By sunset, a lone hiker stumbled upon the school bus parked deep within the forest, not near any designated trail or road. The engine was off, doors wide open, lunch bags sat untouched on the seats. Backpacks hung neatly from hooks. But there was no sign of the children. No footprints. No sounds. Just silence and the wind stirring fallen leaves. An investigation followed. The bus hadn't veered off any known roads. No tire tracks suggested it had even passed through the park entrance. It was as if it had materialized there. The town was shaken, and grief turned into quiet dread. The case went cold, leaving behind only whispers and a photo of smiling children, frozen in time. The town of Elmridge had aged, but some wounds refused to scar over. 27 years had passed since the disappearance, and though new families moved in and children once again filled the classrooms of Mill Creek Elementary, an unspoken tension lingered like fog on autumn mornings. People didn't talk about the missing class anymore, not in public. The anniversary came and went each year with polite silence, no vigils, no memorials. Just the quiet acknowledgement that something terrible had happened, and no one had ever understood why. Elaine Carter sat alone in her kitchen, fingers curled around a chipped coffee mug that had long gone cold. Her son, Matthew, had been one of the 23. His room, still preserved upstairs, remained untouched, like a private shrine of hope and denial. While others moved on, remarried, or even left town, Elaine stayed. She was the only parent who still answered reporters' emails, still kept binders of old case files, newspaper clippings, and search maps in the closet. A stack of papers lay spread across her table, and the soft buzz of a police scanner murmured in the background. Elaine had developed a habit of listening, waiting for something, anything, that might offer a clue, a slip, an echo of the past. Her obsession had cost her friends, and her marriage didn't survive the second year after Matthew vanished. But none of it mattered. What else was left when your child simply disappeared? That morning, as the 27th anniversary loomed just days ahead, a flicker of movement outside caught her attention. Children on bikes rode past, laughing. One boy had hair the exact color of Matthew's. It twisted her gut, that familiar ache, brief but sharp. Later that night, she pulled out the old class photo, the last one ever taken of the children. She stared at it like she had 1,000 times before. But this time, something felt off. A face she didn't quite recognize. Not one of the parents had ever mentioned this boy. He stood at the very end of the back row, half in shadow, smiling oddly. A chill crept through her. She was certain she'd never really noticed him before. The attic was thick with dust, the kind that clung to your skin and turned every breath dry. Elaine climbed the creaking steps slowly, flashlight in one hand, the old class photo in the other. The bulb overhead had burned out years ago, but she knew her way around. This space had become her archive, her private war room. Shelves lined with plastic bins, manila folders, and time-stained notebooks stood like quiet sentinels, each box labeled by year, location, theory. Most people kept Christmas decorations or old clothes in their attic. Elaine kept a map of every place the bus might have gone. She knelt near a cardboard box marked, Field Trip, October 1998, and opened it carefully. Inside were the usual artifacts: Copies of police reports, ranger interviews, faded flyers, and photographs taken the morning of the trip. She laid the class photo on top of a similar copy and studied them side by side. 23 kids. She could still name them all, except for the boy on the far right. She stared at him again, her finger trembling as she hovered over his face. How had she missed him all these years? His features were sharper than the others, too defined for the old camera they'd used. His eyes, they didn't look at the lens. They looked past it, past her. Elaine tore through the boxes, pulling out old PTA lists, attendance rosters, birthday party invitations. She checked the names again. Annie, Carl, Devin, Holly, no one matched the boy in the photo. Not even a first name. He wasn't on the class list. Not in the school directory. Not in any parent's recollection. Her heart pounded. She scanned the back of the photo, hoping for a scribbled note, a date, anything. In the lower left corner, faint pencil marks read, Room 3B, Ms. Haley, Fall 1998. Nothing more. For a moment, she sat back on her heels, overwhelmed. What did it mean? Could the photo have been altered? It had come from the school directly, she was sure of that. She remembered standing with the other parents when it was handed out. But somehow, this boy had gone unnoticed by all of them. A ghost in plain sight. She took the photo downstairs, heart racing. She needed answers. The boy wasn't in the records, but he had been there. He stood among them, smiling. And now, for the first time, he was smiling at her. The fluorescent lights of the Elmridge County Records office buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on rows of filing cabinets and laminate desks. Elaine stepped inside, the class photo clutched tightly in her coat pocket. The building hadn't changed in years, same ticking clock above the receptionist's desk, same faint smell of old paper and lemon cleaner. She'd been here before, more times than she could count, but this time was different. This time she had something specific to search for. A face. A ghost. A name that had to exist, somewhere. Behind the front desk sat Lorna Briggs, a clerk in her 60s with short gray curls and tired eyes. She looked up as Elaine approached and offered a tight smile. Back again, Ms. Carter. Her voice carried a mix of sympathy and weariness. Elaine returned the smile with a nod. I need to check student records from 1998. Mill Creek Elementary, 3rd grade. Lorna hesitated. That year again. Elaine leaned in, lowering her voice. There's a boy in the class photo. I don't know who he is. I need to find a name. With a reluctant sigh, Lorna pushed herself from her chair and led Elaine into the archive room. They passed rows of beige cabinets, each drawer labeled with years and departments. Lorna opened one marked Education 1990s and pulled out the appropriate folders. These are what we've got. Class rosters, registration forms. If he was enrolled, he'll be in here. Elaine sifted through the files methodically. She found Miss Haley's roster, 23 students, all accounted for. No extra name, no outlier. She checked registration forms next, then ID card records. Still nothing. No sign of a boy with that face. It was like he never existed. Frustrated, she held up the photo to Lorna. Do you recognize him? Lorna leaned closer, adjusting her glasses. Her brow furrowed as she studied the shadowed figure on the far right. Strange. I swear I've seen this photo before, but I don't remember that boy. He looks almost older, doesn't he? Like he doesn't belong. Elaine nodded. That's what I thought too. Lorna's eyes narrowed, suddenly uneasy. She reached under the desk and pulled out an old ledger, one of the school's original hardbound enrollment books. Flipping to 1998, she scanned the pages, lips tightening. There's no record of any additional student in that class. No transfer, no visitor. And if someone was added without being registered, well, that just doesn't happen. Elaine leaned in. Could someone have planted him in the photo? Altered it somehow? Lorna closed the book gently and looked her in the eyes. I don't know, Elaine. But sometimes, things happen in this town we never fully understood. And sometimes, it's best not to ask. Elaine's voice dropped to a whisper. I can't afford not to ask anymore. She turned and left, photo in hand, a new question pounding in her mind louder than ever. If this boy was never enrolled, never recorded, then who took his hand that morning and led him onto that bus? Rain had started to fall by the time Elaine reached the old Mill Creek Elementary building, now condemned and fenced off with rusted chain link and faded warning signs. The town had shut it down a decade ago, citing structural instability, but everyone knew the real reason. No one wanted to send their children into a place still haunted by the memory of the 23 who never came home. The building sagged under time's weight, its windows dark and hollow like the eyes of a long-dead thing. But Elaine didn't hesitate. She knew every creak of its floorboards, every hallway, every turn. It had once been Matthew's school. Now it was a mausoleum. She found a gap in the fence, just wide enough to squeeze through, and entered through a broken side door. The inside was silent but not empty. It carried a presence, as though the air itself remembered everything. Water dripped from the ceiling onto warped floorboards, and the smell of mold and dust hung heavy. Her flashlight beam cut across abandoned desks, faded bulletin boards, and tattered posters still clinging to the walls with brittle tape. Room 3B was at the end of the east corridor. Miss Haley's room. Elaine stopped in front of the door. The plaque had fallen off, but she didn't need it. Her hands trembled as she turned the knob. The door groaned open slowly. Inside, everything was coated in a thin layer of dust, but remarkably intact. Tiny desks sat askew, chairs toppled in quiet disarray. The chalkboard dominated the front of the room, cracked and smudged with years of neglect. She approached it, running her fingers over its surface. Then she saw it. 3 faint words scratched into the chalkboard in jagged, backward letters, SULPPLEH. Elaine stepped back, heart pounding. The words only made sense when seen in a mirror, help plus, but that wasn't right. She moved her flashlight, angling it just so. The last word was, help US. And the letters weren't written in chalk. She turned slowly toward the back corner of the room where a dusty mirror remained on the wall, once part of an old reading station. Its surface was grimy, cracked in the corner, but something caught her eye. Her own reflection, yes, but also something else. A shimmer. A faint outline behind the mirror, as if something lay hidden behind the wall. Elaine pressed her hand against the mirror. Hollow. A dull thud echoed behind it. She fumbled in her bag for a small multi-tool, pried at the edge of the glass. It came loose with effort, revealing a narrow wooden panel beneath. She pushed on it, and to her astonishment, it gave way, swinging open like a door. Behind it, a dark passage. She hesitated. The air that wafted out was colder than the rest of the room, still and dry like a sealed tomb. She swallowed hard and stepped inside. The hallway was narrow, just wide enough for one person to move through. The walls were stone, rough, old, and out of place in a school. She followed it down, counting each careful step, until the sound of the storm above faded completely. Somewhere in the dark, a soft creak echoed, not from her. Elaine froze. Then she raised her flashlight again, and saw the markings. The same strange symbol she'd seen on the back of a flyer long ago. A circle intersected by a vertical line, with 3 short dashes above it. It had meant nothing then. Now, surrounded by this forgotten space, it felt like a warning. Or a seal. She whispered to herself, voice shaking, what the hell happened here? And in the silence, she could almost hear something breathe. The passageway opened into a hidden chamber, a space no blueprint of the school had ever shown. Elaine stepped inside, her flashlight beam trembling as it cut through the darkness. The room was larger than she expected, roughly the size of a classroom, but windowless, buried in stone and shadow. The air was still and heavy, filled with the scent of dry rotten dust, as if time had folded in on itself here and stopped altogether. What caught her eye first were the drawings. Lining the walls, scrawled in charcoal and faded crayon, were childlike illustrations, dozens of them. Stick figures, forests, a yellow bus. Smiling faces beside a much larger figure, always drawn in red. It towered over the others, faceless and strange, with long limbs that branched like antlers or roots. The drawings repeated this figure again and again, surrounded by spirals and strange symbols. Some of the images were frantic, etched with such pressure they tore through the paper and into the stone beneath. Elaine's breath hitched. These drawings couldn't be old enough to have survived 27 years, yet here they were. Fresh, preserved, like the children had only just been here. She moved further in. Along the back wall stood a small table, cluttered with objects, a half-melted candle, a child's shoe, a broken watch. Each item was placed carefully, like offerings. At the center lay a small, dust-covered tape recorder. Elaine stared at it, heart thudding. Without thinking, she pressed the play button. A burst of static, then a click. Then a voice, shaky, breathless. It was unmistakably Miss Haley. "If anyone finds this, please don't look for us. I don't know where we are. I don't know what it is. We were walking the trail, and then he appeared, the boy. He wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't recognize him. None of us did." Elaine's knees nearly gave out. Her mouth went dry. The tape continued. He didn't speak. He just smiled. "The children followed him, one by one. I tried to stop them, but they didn't hear me. They walked into the trees. And the light, God, the light turned upside down. Everything bent. Time broke. I broke. He's not a child. He never was." Static swallowed the rest. The tape clicked off. Elaine stared at the recorder, her skin crawling. The boy. The one in the photo. The one no one remembered. He had been there. Not a ghost, not a student. Something else entirely. She turned to the wall again. There, half buried beneath a faded drawing, was the symbol from earlier, the circle intersected with a line, 3 dashes above. But this one was newer, fresher. Drawn not in crayon, but something darker. Almost like blood. Elaine backed away slowly, the weight of the chamber pressing down on her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, to run, but something stronger, something more desperate, held her still. Her son might have been here. The others might still be here. She had found their voices, their art, their last traces in this place. And though it terrified her, the certainty was burning now. This was not the end. This was the beginning of something far older, far stranger, and it wasn't finished yet. Something had been waiting, watching, listening, and now it knew she was here. The forest was darker than Elaine remembered, even under the pale light of the late afternoon sun. Trees stretched high above her like skeletal arms, their branches interlocking to cast strange, shifting shadows across the ground. Fairhaven Woods had always been quiet, but now the silence was unnatural, too complete, as though the birds and insects knew something she didn't. She followed the symbol. It appeared again and again, carved into bark, etched into rocks, laid out in arrangements of twigs along the forest floor, the circle intersected by a vertical line, with 3 short marks above it. It was a trail only she could see, one that hadn't been there all those years ago, or maybe it had been, just hidden in plain sight. Her steps quickened, guided by instinct and desperation. Elaine didn't know where she was going, only that she had to keep moving. Through brambles and over fallen logs, until the forest began to change around her. The trees grew closer together, the light thinner. The ground beneath her feet turned from dirt to soft moss, springy and cold, like walking on a wet sponge. Time felt strange here, elastic. Each step forward felt like it stretched a second longer than it should. Then she saw the clearing. It opened abruptly, a perfect circle of flattened grass surrounded by trees that bent inward as if bowing toward the center. The symbol was burned into the earth at its heart. Elaine's breath caught in her throat. The air felt charged, vibrating with something just outside the reach of sound. Then the wind shifted, and with it, a sudden rustling, like whispers in the leaves. Children. They stepped into the clearing one by one, emerging from the trees in silence. 23 of them. Same clothes as the day they disappeared. Not aged a single day. Some clutched their backpacks. Others looked confused, blinking up at the light. Elaine stood frozen, her flashlight lowered, her mouth ajar in stunned disbelief. Matthew was among them. She wanted to run to him, to scream his name, but something in the stillness held her in place. The children didn't look at her. They looked around, dazed, as if waking from a long dream. Some began to cry. One girl fell to her knees and touched the earth with trembling fingers. Elaine took a cautious step forward. Matthew. At the sound of her voice, heads turned. Faces lit with recognition. Matthew stared at her, eyes wide, 1,000 emotions flashing across his face, fear, hope, confusion. Mom, he whispered. Elaine rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him. He felt real, warm, alive. Her legs gave out and she sank to the ground, holding him as tears fell freely. Other children stumbled toward the edge of the clearing, frightened and overwhelmed. The moment was a blur of sobs, hugs, and stunned silence. But not everyone had returned. As Elaine scanned the group, heart still racing, she realized one child was missing, the boy from the photo. He wasn't there. The others began to speak in soft, frightened voices, bits and pieces of memories that didn't make sense. He led us into the trees, one said. He said it was a game, another added. He made the sky go backwards. Elaine pulled away slightly from Matthew. Who was he? The boy who led you. Matthew's expression shifted. His face grew pale. We called him Thomas, he whispered. But that's not his real name. He wasn't like us. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He was always smiling. He said he wanted to show us where time hides. Elaine's skin prickled. Where is he now? She asked. Matthew looked toward the dark tree line. He said he'd come back. For the last one. The last one. Before she could ask, a gust of wind tore through the clearing, loud and sharp like a scream. The trees shook, the symbol in the ground began to glow faintly, and every child turned in unison toward the forest's edge. There, just beyond the line of trees, a figure stood. Watching. Smiling. Elaine stood at the window long after the children had been taken to the hospital. The living room was silent now, save for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old floorboards under her bare feet. Rain tapped softly against the glass, a quiet rhythm that barely masked the storm in her mind. Her son, Matthew, was upstairs, sleeping in the same room that had waited for him for 27 years. He hadn't aged a day. None of the children had. Their return had ignited a media frenzy, drawing in reporters, government agents, and overwhelmed parents trying to process the impossible. But Elaine wasn't celebrating. Not fully. Not yet. The questions hung over her like a veil. Where had they been? What had kept them preserved in time? And more pressingly, why had they been returned? She didn't believe in miracles anymore. Not the clean kind. Something had taken those children. Something had brought them back. But not all of them. One was still missing. Or worse, never missing to begin with. She turned from the window, lit only by the soft glow of the lamp in the corner, and glanced at the coffee table. The class photo sat there in a worn frame, the glass now cracked from when she had dropped it earlier in shock. 24 children stared back at her. Not 23. She knew them now. Knew each face, each story. But his face, the boy at the far right, was still there. She had asked everyone. None of the other children remembered him clearly. They all had the same blank spots, like dreams you can almost recall, but not quite. Just a feeling, a shape in the dark. Some said they'd followed a boy. Some said they were pulled. None could describe his voice. Elaine moved to the fireplace and poked at the embers. She couldn't sleep. She wasn't sure she ever would again. Because deep down, she felt this wasn't over. They'd been given back their children, yes. But the terms of that exchange remained unknown. And the boy, Thomas, if that was ever his name, had not come back with them. A sound broke the stillness. 3 soft knocks. Elaine froze. Her hand dropped the poker. Slowly, hard hammering, she turned toward the front door. The room seemed to dim around her. The knocks came again, louder this time. 3, evenly spaced, measured, purposeful. She approached slowly, each step heavy. Outside, the rain had picked up, washing the world in silver and shadow. Her hand hesitated over the doorknob. Then she shifted, moved to the side window instead, pulling the curtain just slightly. A figure stood at the edge of the porch, half shrouded in rain and darkness. A boy, not soaked, not shivering, just standing there, smiling. It was him, the boy from the photo. He raised a hand and waved, slowly, like a metronome ticking off time. His smile never faltered. His eyes locked onto hers through the glass. Elaine stumbled back, breath catching in her throat. When she looked again, the porch was empty. But on the windowpane, drawn in condensation, were 3 symbols. A circle, a vertical line, 3 short dashes, and underneath, scrawled in a child's handwriting, "We're not finished."